Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Adventure and Mystery Book Club. I'm Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library. So glad you could be with me today as we read another two chapters of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. We are reading chapters 43 and 44 today. So, just a quick reminder, we are due to finish this book on Wednesday, and we'll start a brand new one on Friday. But which one will we be reading is up to you. So go to the Adventure and Mystery Book Club page on Facebook, and it's the same place where you're watching this now, and check out the Thursday post, and it will give you a list of a bunch of different titles that you can choose from, or if you have a better one in mind, then you can also choose a different title that is not on that list but is in the public domain, and we will decide on Wednesday which one that will be. The highest vote getter will be the one that we pick, or if we have one nomination for several different titles, we'll draw one out of a hat, and that'll be the one we go with. But you know, this is your group, so take part in this, and I hope you will nominate a title that you enjoy or you would like to read, um, and and then we'll go on from there. We'll kind of see what kind of what kind of fun we can have going forward with this next title. There's only been two so far, so far only, out of the entire group, there's only been two comments on what people would like. So just vote in the comments of Thursday's Facebook post, and then we'll pick from those. So there we go. I hope you do it. This always works better when everyone's participating. So I hope you can join in on this. That'd be really good. So just to recap what we have read up to this point, our heroes and Captain Nemo have sailed the submarine, the Nautilus, to the South Pole, where they have discovered it. And by going under the ice, the Great Ice Barrier, from there, they went back up north. I mean, there's really no other place you can go once you're at the South Pole. And they came across a giant squid, which is always sort of the evocative image that many people have when they think of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The battle between the giant squid and the Nautilus, with the crewmen and our heroes and Captain Nemo, all with axes hacking away at this giant squid as it is wrapping its tentacles around the submarine, and threatening to do some damage there. So that was the last chapter, and our heroes have, of course, survived. And now, if you are ready, we will begin chapter 43, entitled The Gulf Stream. None of us will ever be able to forget that terrible scene of April 20th. When I wrote it, I still felt under the sway of violent emotions. Since then, I have gone over my account. I have read it to Conseil and the Canadian. They found it factually correct, but lacking in emotional impact. But to paint such scenes, one would have to write like the greatest of our poets, Victor Hugo. I said that Captain Nemo was crying when he looked at the sea. His sorrow was great. It was the second companion he had lost since our arrival on board, and what a way to die. This man had been crushed, stifled, and torn apart by the powerful arms of a squid, ground up in its steel jaws, and, unlike his companions, he would find no peaceful rest in a coral graveyard. As for me, what had been heartrending was the cry of despair he had uttered in the midst of the struggle. This poor Frenchman, forgetting the strange speech they used on board, had uttered his last call for help in the language of his country and of his mother. This, therefore, meant that among the crew of the Nautilus, who had been bound themselves to Captain Nemo body and soul, and who, like him, were fleeing from all contact with other men. I had a compatriot. Was he the only Frenchman in this mysterious group, obviously made up of different nationalities? This was yet another insoluble problem to torment my mind. Captain Nemo retired to his cabin, and I did not see him again for some time. But how sad, despairing, and irresolute he must have felt, I could judge from the submarine whose soul he was, and which received his every impression. The Nautilus no longer stayed on a fixed course. It would come and go, sometimes even being allowed to float like a corpse at the mercy of the waves. Its propeller had been freed, yet it was scarcely used. The captain cruised about at random. He could not tear himself away from the scene of his last struggle, from that sea which had swallowed up one of his men. 10 days passed like this. It was only on the 1st of May, after sighting the Bahamas at the mouth of the old Bahama Channel, that the Nautilus once again started on a definite northern course. We then followed the greatest of all ocean currents, one which has its own banks, fish, and temperature. We were in the Gulf Stream. It is, in fact, a river which flows freely through the middle of the Atlantic, but whose waters do not mingle with those of the surrounding sea. It's a salty river, saltier than the rest of the Atlantic. It has a mean depth of 3,000 feet and an average width of 60 miles. In certain places, its current travels at a speed of 2.5 knots. The quantity of water within it is greater than that of all the rivers on earth. As Commander Maury discovered, the true source of the Gulf Stream, or, if you will, its point of departure, is the Bay of Biscay. There, its waters, still cool and relatively colorless, begin to form. It then heads south, goes along the equatorial Africa, becomes warmed by the tropical sun, crosses the Atlantic, reaches Cape San Roque on the coast of Brazil, and splits into 2 branches, one of which goes to the yet warmer water of the Caribbean. There, the Gulf Stream, whose job it is to reestablish the equilibrium of ocean temperatures and bring tropical waters to northern seas, begins its stabilizing role. Brought to a white heat in the Gulf of Mexico, it starts north along the coast of America up to Newfoundland. It is deflected by the cold current coming through the Davis Straits, and then heads out to sea. Toward the 43rd parallel, it divides into 2 branches, one of which, aided by the northeast trade winds, returns to the Bay of Biscay and the Azores, while the other, after warming the shores of Ireland and Norway, goes beyond Spitsbergen, where its temperature drops to below 40 degrees, and it empties into the Arctic Sea. It was on this ocean river that the Nautilus was now sailing. Upon leaving the Florida Straits, in a channel 30 miles wide and over 1,000 feet deep, the Gulf Stream travels at a rate of 5 miles an hour. It slows up slightly as it travels north, but only slightly, for if its speed and direction altered seriously, the climate of Europe would undergo changes of incalculable consequences. Toward noon, I was on the platform with Conseil. I told him about the Gulf Stream, and when I was through with my explanation, I asked him to put his hand in the water. Conseil obeyed, and was astonished to find it felt neither hot nor cold. That's because the waters of the Gulf Stream, as they come out of the Gulf of Mexico, I said, are at almost the same temperature as that of the human body. This current is a vast heating apparatus which permits the coasts of Europe to be continually decked in green. And if Maury's calculations are correct, the amount of heat it contains would be enough to melt a river of ice the size of the Amazon and the Missouri put together. Where we were then, the Gulf Stream was traveling at a rate of slightly more than 7 feet per second. Its current is so different from the surrounding sea that its waters are compressed and rise slightly higher than the colder water of the rest of the ocean. It is very rich in salts, and its deep indigo color is easily distinguishable from the green of the surrounding sea. Its line of demarcation is so clear that off the Carolinas the Nautilus had its spur within the Gulf Stream while its propeller was still churning the waters of the Atlantic. This current carried with it a whole world of living beings. Argonauts, so common in the Mediterranean, were to be found here in large groups. Among cartilaginous fish, we saw the most remarkable were rays, whose long, thin tails formed about a third of their bodies, and who were shaped like a huge diamond, 25 feet across. There were also small sharks with a 3-foot-long body seemingly covered with scales, a large head, short rounded muzzle, and sharp teeth arranged in several rows. Among bony fish, I noted some gray wrasse, found only in these waters, a certain kind of gilt head, whose eye shone like fire, croakers 3 feet long, who had a large mouthful of little teeth, and who would let out a soft cry. Black centronotae, which I have already mentioned, a kind of dolphin whose blue body is speckled with gold and silver, a parrotfish, veritable sea-going rainbows, which can rival the most beautiful tropical birds in color, blennies with their triangular heads, bluish garfishes without scales, toadfishes decorated with a yellow stripe in the shape of a Greek T, masses of little gobies with brown spots on their bodies, dipterodons with a silver head and yellow tail, various members of the salmon family, gray mullets with a slender body and soft sheen, and finally a lovely fish, the American horseman, covered with decorations and ribbons, which frequents the shores of that great nation where decorations and ribbons are held in such little esteem. I must add that during the night the phosphorescent waters of the Gulf Stream rivaled the electric light from the Nautilus, especially in the stormy weather which frequently threatened us. By the 8th of May we were off Cape Hatteras, on a parallel with North Carolina. There the Gulf Stream is 75 miles wide and 700 feet deep. The Nautilus continued to cruise about aimlessly. All surveillance on board seemed to have ceased. I had to admit that, under such conditions, it would have been easy to escape. The coast was not only inhabited, but dotted with safe harbors. The sea was constantly crisscrossed by steamers plying between New York or Boston and the Gulf of Mexico, and by schooners carrying on coastal trade between various other points along the shore. There would be reasonable hope of being picked up. It therefore seemed like a good opportunity, in spite of the 30 miles separating the Nautilus from the coast of the United States. But one unfortunate circumstance put a complete stop to the Canadians' plans. The weather was very bad. We were getting near a region where storms are frequent. An area of waterspouts and cyclones fostered by the Gulf Stream are frequent in an area of waterspouts and cyclones fostered by the Gulf Stream itself. There we go. To brave a raging sea in a frail dinghy was to run the risk of almost certain drowning. Even Ned Land admitted this. But he was chafing at the bit. His violent homesickness could be cured by nothing but escape. "Monsieur," he said to me one day, "this has got to come to an end. Things have to be cleared up. Your Captain Nemo is going out toward the open sea and heading north. But let me tell you that I had enough of at the South Pole. I won't follow him to the North Pole." But What can we do, Ned, since we can't escape now? We can do what I said before. Talk to the captain. You didn't say a word when we were near your country, but now that we're near mine, I want to talk to him. When I think that in several days the Nautilus will be off Nova Scotia, and that between there and Newfoundland there's a large bay into which the St. Lawrence empties, and that the St. Lawrence is my river, the river that goes past Quebec, my hometown, when I think of all this, I get so mad, I almost go out of my mind. No, monsieur, I'd rather jump into the sea than stay here. I can't stand it anymore. The Canadian had obviously come to the end of his tether. His energetic personality could not take this prolonged imprisonment. His face was changing day by day, and his character becoming more somber. I could sympathize with him, for I, too, began to feel homesick. Almost 7 months had passed by without our receiving the slightest news from land. Moreover, Captain Nemo's isolation, his altered mood, especially since the fight with the squid, made me see things in a different light. I no longer felt the enthusiasm I had once experienced. One had to be Belgian like Conseil to accept living in a part of the world inhabited only by whales and other creatures of the deep. Truly, I think that if this worthy fellow had gills instead of lungs, he would have made a splendid fish. Well, monsieur, said Ned Land, seeing that I did not answer. Well, Ned, do you want me to ask Captain Nemo what he intends to do with us? Yes, monsieur. Even though he's already as much as told us? Yes. I want to know once and for all. Speak for me alone, if you want. But I see him very rarely. He even avoids me now. All the more reason to go and see him. I'll ask him, Ned. When? Insisted the Canadian. When I see him. Monsieur Aronnax, do you want me to go find him myself? No, let me do it. Tomorrow. Today, said Ned Land. All right, I'll see him today, I replied to the Canadian, who would certainly have ruined all our chances by doing it himself. I remained alone. Once it had been decided to ask the captain, I resolved to do it at once. I like to get things over with. I went to my room. From there, I could hear someone walking about in the captain's cabin. I could not pass up this chance of seeing him. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, then turned the knob. The door opened. I entered. The captain was bent over his work table. He had not heard me enter. I resolved not to leave without having questioned him. I drew nearer. He suddenly looked up, frowned, and said in a rather rude tone of voice, "What are you doing here? What do you want?" "I want to talk to you, Captain." "But I am busy, monsieur. I am working. You have the right to be alone on my ship. Why can't I have the same right?" This reception was not very encouraging, but I had made up my mind to stick it out no matter what he said. "Monsieur," I said coolly, "I have to talk to you about something which cannot wait." "And what is that, monsieur?" he replied sarcastically. "Have you discovered something which has escaped my attention? Has the sea revealed some new secret to you?" We were still at loggerheads. Before I could answer, he showed me a manuscript lying open on the table and said in a serious tone of voice, "Here, Monsieur Aronnax, is a manuscript written in several languages. It contains all my studies on the sea, and with God's help, it will not perish with me. This manuscript, signed with my name and containing also the history of my life, will be enclosed in a small, unsinkable box. The last one of us to survive aboard the Nautilus will throw this box into the sea, and it will drift wherever the wind and currents take it. Signed in his own name. His life's story told by himself. Would this man's secret one day come to light? But to me, at that moment, this statement gave me a way of leading the conversation around to the topic I wanted to discuss. Captain, I replied, I can only approve of your idea. The fruit of all your studies must not be lost. But the means you intend to employ seem primitive. Who knows what winds will guide this box, or into whose hands it will fall? Might there not be some better way? Couldn't you, or one of your men, perhaps? Never, monsieur, said the captain, cutting me short. But I and my companions would be willing to keep this manuscript for you, and if you gave us our freedom— Your freedom? Exclaimed Captain Nemo, getting up. Yes, monsieur, and this is precisely the subject I wanted to discuss with you. For 7 months we have been on board your ship, and now I want to ask you, in the name of my companions and myself, if you intend to keep us here forever. Monsieur Aronnax, said Captain Nemo, I will say now what I said 7 months ago. Whoever enters the Nautilus must never leave it again. But that's slavery. You can call it whatever you like. But everywhere slaves have the right to recover their freedom, and by any means that present themselves. But who has denied you this right? Replied Captain Nemo. Have I ever bound you by any oath? The captain looked at me and crossed his arms. Monsieur, I said, it is pleasant neither for you nor for me to go over this subject a second time, but since we've begun, let's finish it. I repeat that it is not only a question of myself. For me, study is a relief, and a strong diversion, a lure and passion, which can make me forget everything. Like you, I am a man who can live ignored and unknown, with the fragile hope of someday bequeathing to the future the results of my work, by means of a box entrusted to the hazards of the wind and water. In a word, I can admire you, and without displeasure follow you in a life which I partially understand. But there are other aspects of your life that are surrounded in a complexity and a mystery in which my companions and I have no part. But then, even when our hearts were able to go out to you, touched by your sorrows or stirred by your acts of genius or courage, we were forced to suppress even the smallest tokens of sympathy or admiration. It is the feeling that we are foreign to whatever concerns you, that makes our position unacceptable and impossible, not only for me, but especially for Ned Land. Every man, merely by dint of being a man, is worth considering. Have you ever asked yourself what a love of liberty and a hatred of slavery in a nature like Ned Land's means? To what plans of revenge it could lead him, what it could make him think, try to attempt. I stopped. Captain Nemo got up. Ned Land can think, try, or attempt whatever he wants. It makes no difference to me. I didn't go looking for him. It isn't for my pleasure that I keep him on board. But as for you, Monsieur Aronnax, you are an intelligent man, one capable of understanding, even silence. I have nothing more to say. This is the first time you have broached this subject with me, and I hope it will be the last, for if you bring it up again, I shall not even be able to listen. I withdrew. From that day, our situation was very tense. I reported this conversation to my 2 companions. Now we know we can expect nothing from him, said Ned Land. The Nautilus is approaching Long Island. We'll escape whenever the weather's like. But the sky became more and more threatening. We began to see signs of an oncoming hurricane. The sky became white and milky. Cirrus clouds were followed on the horizon by layers of cumulonimbus. Other low clouds sped by. The sea welled up in long waves. All birds disappeared except for the stormy petrel. The barometer dropped considerably, and the mixture in the storm glass decomposed under the influence of the electricity saturating the atmosphere. The struggle of the elements would soon be upon us. The storm broke during the day of May 18th, just as the Nautilus was off Long Island, several miles from the entrance to New York Harbor. I am able to describe this struggle of the elements, for instead of diving to the ocean depths in order to avoid it, Captain Nemo, for some unknown reason, decided to remain on the surface. The wind was blowing from the southwest at gale force, that is, at 35 miles an hour, and by 3 in the afternoon it had reached 55 miles an hour. This was now storm weather. The captain, seemingly unaffected by the strong gusts of wind, had taken up a station on the platform. He had had himself tied around the waist as a precaution against the huge waves breaking over the ship. I hoisted myself out on deck and also had myself tied, dividing my admiration between the storm and this incomparable man observing it. The raging sea was swept by large, tattered bits of cloud, soaking themselves in the water. I no longer saw any of those smaller waves, which usually form in the hollow of big ones. There was nothing but long, murky undulations, so compact that their crests never broke. Their height was increasing. They seemed to stir each other on. The Nautilus rolled and pitched horribly, sometimes lying on its side and sometimes standing up as straight as a mast. Toward 5 o'clock a torrential rain began to fall, but it calmed neither the air nor the water. The wind was now blowing in gusts up to 100 miles an hour. It is under such conditions that houses are knocked over and roofing tiles are driven through wooden doors, that iron grillwork is broken, and that 24-pound cannon are displaced. And yet the Nautilus, in the midst of the storm, merely proved the saying of nautical engineers that a well-built hull can defy any storm. It was more than just a rock, for waves can destroy rocks. It was rather an iron spindle without masts or rigging, obedient and mobile, which could travel unharmed amid the sea's fury. Meanwhile, I carefully examined the raging waves. They measured as much as 50 feet in height, between 500 and 600 feet in breadth, and were traveling at about a third of the speed of the wind, or, in other words, at 35 miles per hour. Their size and force increased with the depth of the ocean. I then understood the role waves play, imprisoning air in their flanks and forcing it down to the bottom of the sea, where its oxygen brings life. Their pressure had been calculated to go up to 6,500 pounds per square foot on any surface against which they strike. It was such waves in the Hebrides moved a block of stone weighing 84,000 pounds, and which, in the storm of December 23rd, 1864, after destroying part of Tokyo, traveled across the Pacific at 450 miles an hour to break that same day against the shores of America. The violence of the storm increased as night came on, as it did at Reunion Island in 1860 during a cyclone. The barometer fell to 28 inches. At twilight, I saw a large ship pass by, struggling painfully along the horizon. It was lying to, at reduced speed, trying to stay afloat. It must have been a steamer from one of the lines plying between New York and Liverpool or Le Havre. It soon disappeared into the darkness. By 10 at night, the sky was on fire. The heavens were crisscrossed by lightning. It was too bright for me, but Captain Nemo looked straight at it and seemed to breathe in the soul of the tempest. The air was filled with a loud, confused noise, coming partly from the crashing waves, partly from the roaring wind, and partly from the thunderclaps. The wind seemed to come from all directions. The hurricane was whirling counterclockwise, as opposed to storms in the southern hemisphere, whose winds travel clockwise. The Gulf Stream. It would be better to call it the king of tempests, for it breeds these formidable hurricanes through the difference in temperature between its currents and the surrounding air. The rain was followed by a shower of fire. The drops of water changed into sparks. One could have thought that Captain Nemo, wishing a death worthy of himself, was seeking to be struck by lightning. With a terrifying pitching motion, the Nautilus would lift its steel spur into the air like the tip of a lightning rod, and I could see it give off long fingers of electricity. I felt crushed and at the end of my strength. I crawled on my stomach toward the hatch. I opened it and went down into the lounge. The storm then reached its greatest violence. It was impossible to stand up inside the Nautilus. Captain Nemo came back in about midnight. I heard the reservoirs fill little by little, and the Nautilus gently sank beneath the surface. Through the open panels in the lounge, I saw large, frightened fish pass by like ghosts in the fiery water. Some were struck dead by lightning before my eyes. The Nautilus kept on going down. I thought it would find calm water at a depth of 50 feet, but no, the upper layers of the sea were thrashing about too violently. We had to go down to 150 feet into the bowels of the ocean before we could find peace. But once there, what tranquility, what silence, what calm. Who could have known that a terrible hurricane was raging on the surface of the sea? Chapter 44, entitled 47 degrees, 24 minutes north latitude and 17 degrees, 28 minutes west longitude. We had been driven eastward by the storm. All hope of escaping in the region of New York or the St. Lawrence disappeared. Poor Ned, in a state of despair, shut himself up like Captain Nemo. Conseil and I no longer left each other's side. I said that the Nautilus had been driven to the east. It would have been more accurate to say the northeast. For several days it wandered about in the midst of one of those fogs so dangerous for sailors, sometimes sailing on the surface, sometimes under the water. Such fogs are principally due to melting ice, which fills the air with moisture. How many ships have been lost in these waters when they were almost within sight of the dim lights on the coast? How many wrecks these thick mists have caused? How many vessels have gone aground on reefs whose warning eddies were drowned out by the wind? How many boats have collided with one another in spite of their riding lights and the warnings of their foghorns and alarm bells? As a result, the bottom of the ocean in this area looked like a battlefield, where all those ships conquered by the sea still lay. Some were already old and encrusted. Others, still young, reflected the glare of our searchlight on their ironwork and the copper of their hulls. How many of these boats had gone down with all hands, including the crew and whole groups of immigrants, near those points marked as dangerous on charts? Cape Race, St. Paul Island, Belle Isle Strait, and the mouth of the St. Lawrence. And in just the past few years, how many victims have been entered in the grim annals of the Royal Mail, Inman, and Montreal lines? The Solway, the Isis, the Parramatta, the Hungarian, the Canadian, the Anglo-Saxon, the Humboldt, and the United States all run aground. The Arctic and the Lyonnais sunk in collisions. The President, the Pacific, and the city of Glasgow, whose fate was never known. And the Nautilus cruised through this somber wreckage as if passing the dead in review. By May 15th, we were at the southern tip of the Grand Banks. This area is a product of marine deposits, a huge mass of organic debris brought either from the equator or by the Gulf Stream, or from the North Pole by the countercurrent of cold water which runs along the coast of North America. It also contains piles of rocks dropped by the breaking up of ice. In addition, it is a vast boneyard of fish, mollusks, and zoophytes, which die there by the millions. The sea is not very deep over the Grand Banks, no more than several hundred fathoms, but toward the south there is an abrupt depression, a pit going down to 10,000 feet. There the waters of the Gulf Stream spread out, losing their speed and heat, but becoming an ocean. Among the fish the Nautilus frightened away as it passed by, I will cite the 3-foot lumpfish with a blackish back and orange stomach, which gives other fish a fine but little heeded example of marital fidelity. A large unernak, a kind of emerald moray, excellent to eat. Caracs, with big eyes and a head looking somewhat like that of a dog. Blennies, which produce their eggs like a reptile. Black gobies, or groundlings, 3/4 of an inch long. Grenadiers, with their long tails and brilliant silver sheen. Fast fish who had wandered far from the Arctic Sea. The nets also brought in tough, brave, and powerful fish, one with strong muscles and with spines on its head and fins, a veritable scorpion 7 to 10 feet long, and the deadly enemy of blennies, gadoids, and salmon. It was the bullhead of northern waters, with a gnarled body entirely brown, except for the red on its fins. The sailors on the Nautilus had some difficulty with this fish, which, thanks to special gill covers, can keep its lungs from drying out in the air and can live for some time out of water. Merely as a reminder, I will cite Boscawen's little fish, which often accompany ships for a long time in northern waters, sharp-snouted bleaks, found only in the North Atlantic, hogfish and gadoids, represented by their principal species, the cod, which I was able to see in its favorite waters, the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. One might say that cod are mountain fish, for Newfoundland is no more than an underwater mountain. As the Nautilus made its way through their close-pressed ranks, Conseil could not refrain from saying, "Are those cod? But I thought cod were flat, like flounder or sole." "You simpleton," I cried. "Cod are only flat in a grocery store, where they've been opened and spread out. But in the water, they're as round and slender as mullets, and they're perfectly built for swimming." "Since monsieur says so, I believe it," replied Conseil. "But what an enormous number of them there are!" "Yes, my friend, and there would be even more if not for their enemies, the hogfish and man. Do you know how many eggs have been counted in a single female cod?" "Let's pick a good number," replied Conseil. 500,000. 11,000,000, my friend. 11,000,000! I won't believe that until I count them myself." "Go ahead and count them, Conseil, but it would be easier and quicker to just believe what I say. Besides, the French, English, Americans, Danes, and Norwegians catch them by the thousands. Prodigious quantities of them are consumed each year. If it weren't for their amazing fertility, the seas would soon be empty of cod. Why, in England and America alone, 5,000 ships manned by 7,500 sailors are used in cod fishing. Each boat brings back at least 40,000 fish, which makes a total catch of 20 million. The figures from Norway are about the same. All right, said Conseil. I'll take Monsieur's word for it. I won't count them. What? The 11 million eggs, but just let me say one thing. What's that? That if every egg hatched, you'd only need 4 cod to feed all of England, America, and Norway. While we skimmed over the bottom of the Grand Banks, I could clearly see the long lines armed with 200 fish hooks, which each boat puts out by the dozen. The lines were held down on one end by a little grappling anchor and held up on the other end by a cork buoy. The Nautilus had to maneuver skillfully through this underwater network. But it did not stay long in waters containing so many fishing boats. It went up to 42 degrees north latitude, off St. John and Heart's Content, which was where the transatlantic cable ended. Instead of continuing north, the Nautilus headed east as if it wanted to follow the underwater plateau on which the cable rests. It was on May 17th, about 500 miles out from Heart's Content, and at a depth of 9,000 feet, that I first saw the cable lying on the ocean floor. Conseil, whom I had not forewarned, thought it was some gigantic sea serpent, and was about to classify it as he usually did in such situations. But I told him right, and in order to console him for having made such a mistake, I told him various facts about the laying of the cable. The first cable was put down from 1857 to 1858, but after transmitting 400 telegrams, it ceased functioning. In 1863, engineers constructed a new cable, 2,100 miles long and weighing 4,500 tons, which was put aboard the Great Eastern. This attempt also failed. Now, on May 25th, the Nautilus, cruising at a speed of 12,585 feet, sailed over the exact spot where the break in this cable had occurred. It had happened 638 miles from the coast of Ireland and had ruined the entire project. At 2 in the afternoon, it was noticed that communications with Europe had been interrupted. The electricians on board decided to cut the cable before fishing it back up, and by 11 at night they had brought up the part which had caused the trouble. It was repaired, spliced together again, and then put back in the water. 2 days later, it broke again, but this time it could not be brought back up from the ocean depths. But the Americans did not despair. Cyrus Field, the daring man who had promoted the enterprise and risked his entire fortune in it, issued a new set of bonds which were immediately bought up. Another, stronger cable was manufactured. Its bundle of electric wires was insulated inside a covering made of a rubber-like substance called gutta percha, which in turn was protected by layers of different kinds of cloth, all placed inside a metal casing. The Great Eastern once more set out to sea on July 13, 1866. This time they succeeded. Nevertheless, a strange thing occurred. Several times as they were unrolling the cable, the electricians noticed that nails had been driven into it in order to corrode its core. Captain Anderson conferred with the officers and engineers. Finally, they put up a notice stating that if the guilty party were discovered on board, he would be thrown into the sea without even a trial. From then on, this criminal act was not repeated. Excuse me. On July 23rd, when the Great Eastern was only 500 miles from Newfoundland, it received a telegraphic message from Ireland saying that an armistice had been signed between Prussia and Austria after the Battle of Königgrätz. On the 27th, it sighted the port of Heart's Content through the fog. They had finally succeeded, and the first message young America sent to old Europe contained those wise words so rarely understood. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. I knew the electric cable would not be in its original state, looking as if it had just come out of the factory, and in fact, this long snake was covered with bits of shell, encrusted with foraminifera, and embedded into a mass of rocky matter that protected it against whatever mollusks might have been able to bore holes in it. It was resting calmly, protected from ocean currents, and lying beneath a pressure which actually favors the transmission of that electric spark which goes from America to Europe in 32 one-hundredths of a second. This cable will probably last indefinitely, for it has been remarked that its covering of gutta percha is improved by being beneath the ocean. Moreover, on this well-chosen underwater plateau, the cable never lies at depths which might cause it to break. The Nautilus followed it to its lowest point, situated at a depth of 14,537 feet, and there it rested without any strain or traction. Then we drew near the spot where the accident had taken place in 1863. There the ocean floor formed a wide valley 75 miles across, within which one could have placed Mont Blanc without having its peak emerge above the surface. The valley was closed off to the east by a vertical wall 6,500 feet high. We arrived there on May 28th, and the Nautilus was then no more than 100 miles from Ireland. Was Captain Nemo going to continue north toward the British Isles? No. To my great surprise, he turned south toward continental waters. As we went around the Emerald Isle, for a moment I could make out Cape Clear and the lighthouse of Fastnet Rock, which lights the way for thousands of ships leaving Glasgow and Liverpool. An important question then crossed my mind. Would the Nautilus dare venture into the English Channel? Ned, who had reappeared since he had drawn near land, asked me continual questions about our course. But how could I know? Captain Nemo remained out of sight. After giving the Canadian a glimpse of the shores of America, did he now intend to show me the coast of France? Nevertheless, the Nautilus continued heading south. On May 30th, it passed within sight of Land's End, cruising between this tip of England and the Scilly Isles. But he intended to enter, if he intended to enter the English Channel, he now had to turn sharply to the east, but he did not. During that day of May 31st, the Nautilus went around and around at a circular course that intrigued me greatly. It seemed to be looking for a certain spot, but having difficulty finding it. At noon, Captain Nemo himself came up on the deck to take our position. He didn't say a word to me. He seemed more somber than ever. What was making him so sad? Was it the proximity of European shores? Did he still feel pangs of homesickness for the country he had left? If not, what did he feel? Remorse or regret? These thoughts occupied my mind for a long time, and I had a kind of presentiment that fate would soon betray the captain's secrets to me. On the next day, June 1st, the Nautilus continued the same maneuvers. It was obviously trying to find some precise spot in the ocean. Captain Nemo came on deck to shoot the sun as he had the day before. The sea was calm, the sky clear. 8 miles to the east, a large steamship was outlined against the horizon. It was flying no colors, so I could not tell its nationality. Several minutes before the sun passed its zenith, Captain Nemo took his sextant and looked through it with great care. The complete calm of the ocean made this operation much easier. The Nautilus lay immobile, neither rolling nor pitching. I was on the platform watching. When he had finished, the captain said, "It's here!" Then he went back down the hatch. Had he seen the ship which had altered its course and seemed to be bearing down on us? I could not say. I returned to the lounge. The hatch closed, and I could hear the whistling noise of water entering the reservoirs. The Nautilus began to sink straight down, for its propeller was not turning. Several minutes later, it stopped at a depth of 2,733 feet. The lights went out in the lounge, and the panels opened, and through the window I could see the ocean brilliantly lit within a radius of half a mile by the light on top of the submarine. I looked out to port and saw only a vast expanse of calm water. To starboard, there was a large object sticking up from the ocean floor, which attracted my attention. It looked like some ruin buried beneath a snow-like blanket of whitish shells. As I examined this object carefully, I thought I could make out the form of a rather large, demasted ship, which had sunk bow first. It must have been a very old wreck. In order to be that encrusted with marine life, it must have already spent many years at the bottom of the ocean. What ship was it? Why did the Nautilus come to visit this grave? Was it something more than a mere storm which had dragged the ship beneath the waves? I did not know what to think. Then, suddenly, next to me, I could hear Captain Nemo saying slowly, "This ship used to be called the Marseille. It was launched in 1762 and carried 74 guns. On August 13, 1778, under the command of La Pope Vertrio, it fought bravely against the Preston. On July 4th, 1779, it assisted in the capture of Grenada, along with Admiral d'Estaing's squadron. On September 5th, 1781, it took part with the Count of Grasse in the Battle of Chesapeake Bay. In 1794, the French Republic changed the ship's name. On April 16th of that same year, it went to Brest to join Villeray-Joyau's squadron, which had been ordered to escort a convoy of wheat coming from America under the command of Admiral Van Stabel. On May 30th and 31st, the squadron met up with English ships. Today, monsieur, is the 1st of June, 1868. 74 years ago, to this very day, on this exact spot, at 47 degrees 24 minutes north latitude and 17 degrees 28 minutes west longitude, this ship, after a heroic struggle, completely demasted, its hold filling with water and a third of its crew out of action, preferred to go down with its 356 sailors rather than surrender. A flag was nailed onto its stern flagpost, and then it disappeared beneath the surface, with all of its men shouting, "Long live the Republic!" The Revenge, I cried. That's right, monsieur, the Revenge. What a lovely name, Captain Nemo murmured as he crossed his arms. And that, my friends, is the conclusion of chapter 44. So, we are, as I said, almost to the end of our story here. Next time we meet on Wednesday at 4 p.m., I'll be reading the last 3 chapters. They are short chapters, so we shouldn't take the entire time reading them. I think we'll have a little chance to kind of discuss stuff, and hopefully we'll have some interesting titles that are nominated between now and then, and we will find out or decide, one of the two, what our next title will be, and that title will be we'll start reading on Friday. So things are moving quickly. Be ready for the end of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and get ready for a brand new story that we will start off on Friday. Once again, I'm going to urge folks to vote or to nominate a title that I have not put on there, as long as it's in public domain. Usually it's available through Project Gutenberg. That makes it easier for everyone because it's free. So vote for something that I've already listed, or nominate a brand new title that you appreciate. So far, we've had one of each. We've had two comments so far. Go to Thursday's Facebook post on the Adventure and Mystery Book Club Facebook page. Vote for your favorite title in the comments, and by Wednesday we'll decide one way or another what title we're going to be reading. So if you want your voice to be heard, now's the time to do that. Thank you very much for joining me for another reading and for the Adventure and Mystery Book Club, and we will see you again on Wednesday. Bye, everyone.